Francesca. First of all, it's an honor for me to be invited here to speak in Camerino, in this very, very old historical university. I like it very much here. And I try to find, let's say, a kind of summary of a lot of things you heard from my former speakers. So let's emphasize some things. Daniela was talking about user demands and user needs. That's very, very relevant. Maura was talking about the institutionalization, of lifelong learning and the labor market relevance. And Elisabetta, I like that very much, common qualification currency in Europe. That might be a bit a high task, let's say, in this way. And Leonardo focused on different approaches and sectoral job and competence validation, which is very relevant, and Carla was focusing on the balancing and the individual personal pathways. And you will find all these elements, you will find in my speech as well. First of all, I have to say there is no general model of validation and recognition, and I think there will no common model of recognition and validation. As it is usual in the European Commission, it will be a European framework. And the third thing is that I want to emphasize first the main background and elements from a European perspective, but I apologize for coming back to German aspects because I'm very used to these elements as well. So you will see that there is a lot of tools and even skills varying from member state to member state, and it's not an easy task to find a way to validate and recognize this non-formal and informal learning aspects. From the content, I first will say something about the informal and non-formal learning within the lifelong learning concept and strategy. The second time I will refer to the relevance of these kinds of learning areas, and then the main heart is on the validation and recognition tools and skills. And at last saying something about the challenges. But first of all, the background of informal and non-formal learning. Why is it relevant? Sorry for that. So if I put on the slide some examples, some points which from my perspective are relevant. So the first thing is that we are dealing with a constant change, economically, but also on social matters. Demographical change, skills shortages, new skills, new jobs, migration, globalization, etc. So by having these changes constantly, the individuals have to have a big task to manage these things. And then the lifelong learning strategies and concepts are seen, if you look in conceptual papers, are seen as an answer to these challenges, even from in labor and education policies. And there is a European stimulation of the recognition of non-formal and informal learning. You find a lot of instruments there. Lifelong learning as a concept is one, but also the already mentioned European qualification framework, the European credit transfer system, the common European framework of reference for languages, and the European credit points for vocational and educational training. Europass was mentioned as well. There are a lot of instruments which are stimulating non-formal, the recognition of non-formal and informal learning coming from the European level. And if you went to the different events, you find that non-formal and informal learning is of increasing interest and relevance, even for the allocation of jobs and the adjustment of needed skills. One good example was the IT sector in the beginning. A lot of people coming from different professions got new qualifications and were accepted as experts even within the industry without a formal qualification in the beginning. And then formal qualification starts and recognizing of these qualifications, formal recognizing begins. And another point, the regional level and the orientation at the individual biography, learning paths and pathways. From my experience, from my perspective, are most relevant for the success of lifelong learning. I was in a European conference where the different lifelong learning implementations and systems were discussed from a national level. But everyone agreed that the success of the implementation of lifelong learning structures will be at the region. And where people are living and where people get fond of these opportunities. And national validation of informal and non-formal learning is very different in the European member states, very different because of the different education and training systems. If we talk about non-formal learning in Germany, it's totally different if we talk about non-formal learning, let's say in France or in Italy as well. Okay, what I said already is that there is a European reference background, and this is done for transparency, comparable documentation, mobility, recognition of qualifications, etc. And you find two main different approaches. One is an approach on focusing on investment in learning. That's mainly time. Time you spend in learning, like the ECTS system. But more and more, and all the speakers before said this, there is a focus on learning outcomes and the certifications of given competencies. So let's say as an example or first summary that all these European instruments are a reference and reflection background for the improvement of the validation and recognition of non-formal and informal learning, especially in these three, especially in vocational education and training. Okay, that's the first overview, and that's the first leading to the first problems and challenges. So the problem starts with the definition. If you get a document today which is dealing with informal and non-formal learning, it always starts with a definition. And if you look at these definitions, they have some common elements, but they are very different if you compare the definitions of countries, different member states, but sometimes also within the countries. And they are very oriented at different interests, let's say in this way, different perspectives, etc. And the most practical ones, and that's the reason why I won't give you a definition now. The most practical one is to distinguish it in relation to formal learning, to formal certification, regulation by public authorities. And the second challenge, consultancies don't have problems, they always see challenges, so let's do it this way. Second challenge is in relevance to the pluralization of individual learning and working paths, but also different lifestyles today. So it's not you don't find typical careers in life and also in your work. There is also an increasing diffusion of education and training opportunities and modalities, and for Germany I can say that also with the educational institutions. Our vocational schools of today are very, very different from the schools 15, 20 years ago. So the heterogeneity and the diffusion of occupations and their specializations can be seen as a hindrance for a common validation framework. Even in formal education, that's one example. We have a big discussion about our national qualification framework since years by transferring our formal qualifications into the European qualification framework. And even in the Europe Observer project, we have a self-assessment tool, and it was accepted and used very differently in the countries involved. In Germany, we got only a few interviews back, and they said, this is not too much, this is not oriented at our specific occupations and practice. So that's very different. What you are asking is more things that are on school and the university and so on. So these are a few examples. And we have a big discussion on informal learning. Non-formal is not so much the problem in Germany, but informal learning, which is starting from the birth. If you reflect your informal learning, it's starting from the birth, and it's of high relevance until primary school, and decreasing relevance during the formal education, and then of increasing relevance for the rest of the life cycle, even from employability perspective. And there the recognition of this area is too low. We see it just working on monitoring education and training in our area, the rural area, with lots of cities and 10 million people, and we can't get any facts on informal learning. And another point are the blurring borders between formal and non-formal and informal learning. That's also the reason why everyone tries to define it, to saying what is this and what is that. But as far as I recognize and know, from a company perspective, it doesn't matter if a competence is called informal, non-formal or formal. Instead you have the competence the company needs, and you can make it evident. Second point, relevance of non-formal and informal learning. I won't go through any detail, but just a few hints on it. Non-formal, informal learning, as I tried to explain, is a relevant part of lifelong learning. You can see it by that in every lifelong learning strategy and concept we find these two areas, and there is a straight focus on it. And there is an increasing acceptance in informal learning. In Germany there was 2001, and now I think it will increase a bit. 2 of 3 enterprises in Germany want a formal recognition of workplace integrated learning, especially in SMEs. So there's a need for it. I said that is also in every strategy, conception and so on. And the recognition of non-formal and informal learning, you find some sectoral collective agreements, and we did some European projects on this as well. So in the sectors you find first attempts to it. Wholesale and retail sector and construction, the metal sector I know a bit better. There are these things, but also electronic, chemical and public administration you find these things in Germany. And at last, personal selections in companies. Personal selection in companies is not only done by formal graduations. It's more and more based on non-formal and informal competences. Even if I select to recruit people for our institute, I look at the formal certificates, but this is the first impression. The more impression is the non-formal and informal competences you can make evident. And there are different regional and sectoral projects. EU Observer is one of it, and you find also different projects on this area. But as everyone said before, it's mainly not systematically developed and formal implemented. Development takes place underneath regulative policies and is aiming at identification and assessment more than at recognition. I won't go through this point because you already heard a bit or a lot about it. For Germany, the main problem is that there are different interests and responsibilities of the stakeholders, and there are diverse legal responsibilities, and there is a lack of permeability between the different education and training areas and systems.